Most people agreed that the system for funding local authorities across the UK was unfair, unpopular and ripe for reform. The tax you were charged, called the rates, was based on the value of your house and not on your ability to pay. Scottish local authorities had been required by law to carry out a re-evaluation of house values. In other words, many people, especially if they lived in a big house, were about to be faced with a big tax hike.
There had been a revaluation of rating, which itself seemed to be grossly unfair, and the government was under intense pressure, and particularly the Scottish office was under intense pressure from within Scotland to do something about it.
The Tories had the solution, a flat rate tax. Everyone would pay the same. They called it the community charge. Everyone else called it the poll tax.
Margaret Thatcher was captivated by the story of the wee Scots wifey, the widow living at home in a big house, who was going to be hit by the revaluation and was going to be paying disproportionately more. And Margaret Thatcher thought of this sort of, Sunday Post reading lady in Crieff and thought how unfair it should be that she should have worked hard all her life and now be hit by this particular tax. The poll tax seems to be fairer to me, and it's certainly something that the Scottish Party are asking me to do in order to resolve this problem. Fair enough. This is a Scottish solution to a Scottish problem. A sign, actually, that I'm taking seriously the need to be sensitive. And so for reasons that are, if you're prepared, to be fair to her, entirely understandable, she and the Scottish Conservative Party made a catastrophic political mistake.
The coincidence of that rates re-evaluation was the reason that the poll tax came to Scotland a year early. The Scottish Tory leadership had pressed for it to be brought. They thought it would be popular, a vote winner. But Scotland, already nursing a powerful grievance, didn't see it that way. For the poll tax, a year early, played straight into Scotland's now well-entrenched sense of its own victimhood.
What was so nauseating and appalling and just insulting about the poll tax was that the Thatcher government decided to introduce it in Scotland first. They were using the people of Scotland as guinea pigs, and it was almost as if the Tory Secretary of State for Scotland had offered Scotland on a plate.
Guinea pigs. The shaming indignity of it, a proud nation diminished to the status of a laboratory rodent. It was perfect for Scotland's mounting sense of injustice. The guinea pig entered the national mythology. The truth is more prosaic.
The reason it was introduced a year earlier in Scotland was nothing to do with Margaret Thatcher. George Younger and his colleagues in Scotland took the view that so unpopular was the old rating system, the quicker they could get rid of it, the better. And because for technical reasons it was possible to introduce the poll tax earlier in Scotland than in England, Margaret Thatcher and the Cabinet were asked by George Younger, we want policy agreement that we can introduce it a year earlier. You're going to introduce it in England anyway. The one is not dependent on the other, but we would like to do it now rather than wait. And the Cabinet said, if that's your judgment, by all means go ahead. Now, politically, it was, in retrospect, a very, very unwise thing to have done for all the reasons that we are familiar with. But that's the background. It was not imposed on Scotland. It wasn't Thatcher's idea. It wasn't a trial or a guinea pig or any of that nonsense. That's all historically absurd.
The community charge was not just a hated tax. It made Scotland confront its own powerlessness. When the bills appeared on the doormats, it brought the constitutional question, the democratic deficit, into every home in the land.
The fundamental core of the thing was the emerging awareness of the enormous authority and power of what's sometimes referred to as the Crown and Parliament. That is the fact that a majority in Westminster, if such existed, and especially a substantial majority, could in fact drive policies which may be unpopular in very many sections of society, and really could suggest the emergence of a kind of electoral dictatorship, because the kind of interventionism which was happening for Westminster by that time, by the late 80s, early 1990s, had never really occurred within the Union state since the immediate aftermath of the Jacobite rebellion of the 1750s.
It's to do with this cry which first went up, I think, in about 1981, about she hasn't got a mandate. You know. Most people in Scotland didn't vote for her. At first, this didn't seem to be an important remark. Gradually, it did seem to be an important remark. And people began to say, yes, but Scotland is a political unit. It's a polity. It's a nation also in a political sense, and therefore what its majority wants must count somewhere. It can't count for nothing. And we are getting a government we didn't vote for.